You're listening to TGI Sports Talk with your host, Keith Angle, on Northeast Streaming Sports.
Good morning, everybody. Keith Angle for TGI Sports Talk right here on the Northeast Streaming Sports Network. Excuse me. How are you guys today? This beautiful, well, so far it's a beautiful Friday morning here in East Greenbush, New York. We're still, I guess I can't say still, will always be the first streaming webcast on the internet. Good morning, Dave Guyette from East Greenbush, New York. That is the first. I hope you guys are doing well. I want to thank all the groups again that allow me to share this today. My guest is scheduled to be Darrell Evans. I talked to Darrell last night and he was all good to go, but he's not yet in the room. I just texted him. He may be having some technical difficulties, but we'll certainly get him in the room when we can. So we'll stretch a little bit this morning. Want to thank my guest from last week, Louis Tiant, the legendary pitcher. Started with the Cleveland Indians, pitched for the Twins, probably known best for his time with the Red Sox and getting to the 75 World Series. As I've said several times, probably the best World Series in my lifetime. Also pitched with the Yankees, finished up with the Angels and the Pirates. And great interview. We had a couple of technical difficulties that day, but I think it came across good. So I want to thank Louis for coming on. I want to thank his son Daniel for helping make that happen. And again, this morning we're waiting on Darrell Evans to arrive, so we'll stretch a little bit. Darrell was a great ball player. Bill James, noted baseball historian, has stated more than once that Darrell Evans is the most underrated ball player in the history of Major League Baseball. Darrell's not in the Hall of Fame. Darrell hit tons of home runs in his career. Darrell hit, let's see, what did he hit? 400 and some. Let's get to his numbers here real quick. 414 home runs. One of the biggest things that stands out was he was an on-base machine, 361 over his career. Didn't strike out a lot for a slugger either. Played a lot of positions, third base, first base, played some outfield, was a DH later in his career. At the time, he held the record for the oldest player to hit 40 home runs in a game. He hit 40. I think he hit 40 on a dot when he was 38 years old. Let me just send something to Darrell here. Always a challenge, guys, live. You know, Darrell, again, was also on the 84 World Series winning Tigers, was a key member of that team. And he played many years with the Braves, came up for good in 1971. He was originally drafted in 1965. He was drafted several times. He was drafted by the Cubs. He was drafted by the Yankees and the Tigers and the Phillies and the A's, and finally signed with the A's, was playing in their minor league system, and they didn't protect him in the Rule 5 draft, and he ended up getting taken by the Braves. And he was part of an interesting Braves team. They weren't that productive necessarily as far as wins and losses, but he was there during a time when Henry Aaron was chasing the home run record. So he was a close-up witness to history. He was part of a team that had the first, and if I'm right, only 3 teams have ever had 3 different guys hit 40 home runs or more in the same season. And the Braves did it in 1974 with, was it 74 or 73? Hang on one second. I can tell you quickly just by looking at Darrell's numbers. 1973, Darrell hit 40 home runs. Henry Aaron hit 40 home runs. And Davey Johnson, future manager of the Mets, had his most prolific home run output of his career with 40 home runs. So they were fun teams to watch if you're a Braves fan, I guess, but they didn't really win a lot of games. So we'll talk to Darrell about that. We'll talk about him, some of the great teammates he played with, and Dusty Baker and Ralph Garr. We already mentioned the legendary Henry Aaron. Was managed by another Hall of Famer in Eddie Matthews. So Darrell had some productive years in Atlanta, then got traded to the Giants, where he got to play with another Hall of Famer in Willie McCovey near the end of his career. Another Hall of Famer at the end of his career, I should say. But he was, again, a very productive player. He got to play with one of my favorite players, my favorite player of all time, Bobby Mercer, once he got traded to San Francisco. Spent some very productive years individually with the Giants. Nothing from Darrell yet, guys. I'm a little worried. I know he's in Central Time, and we sometimes, only one other time did we have this mix-up time-wise. I talked to Darrell last night, probably about 10 o'clock, and I thought we were good, but we'll see if hopefully Darrell will come in here before we go too much further. That's FedEx in my text. That's not Darrell. Anyway, Darrell played very productively with the Giants. Again, no winning. Well, they had some winning records, no division winners, no playoffs. So Darrell spent the early part of his career chasing the playoffs. Played for some great, really good managers in Joe Altobelli, Dave Bristol, who had managed the Reds and would later manage the Braves. And also another Hall of Famer, Frank Robinson. Darrell gets traded after that. 1980, I want to say 1984. Yeah, before the 1984 season, he played out his option. He was a free agent and signed with the Tigers and played for, guess what? Another Hall of Fame manager in Sparky Anderson, and played on a really, really, really good team. You know, it's funny. You look back at the 84 Tigers, and they had a tremendous record. I believe they got out of the gate 35-5. Tremendous start to a season. Still a record as far as I know. And they just ran away from the pack. And, you know, there weren't superstars. There was good players. There was Hall of Fame pitcher Jack Morris. There was Lou Whitaker and Alan Trammell at the Keystone. You had Chet Lemon in center field, who might have been the final piece to that. You had Kirk Gibson, a young Kirk Gibson just coming into his own. Lance Parrish. So really good players. But, you know, not the big red machine of the 70s. So this team was just a legendary. They had a legendary year. And they had a lot of grinders, man. A lot of grinders. And we'll talk to Darrell. Hopefully we'll talk to Darrell about that coming up soon. Darrell also did some managing. I had forgotten, actually, until I was doing some research, that Darrell was actually the batting coach for the Yankees in the early 90s. I want to say it was during the Stump Merrill years. So let's see if I can find it quickly. 1990. He was batting coach, the hitting coach for the Yankees. There was rumors at the time, apparently, that he may eventually take over the job from Stump Merrill. And if you remember Stump Merrill as a Yankee fan, it wasn't a great time. But that didn't come to fruition. He left the Yankees shortly thereafter. But he did bounce around in the minor leagues and as a hitting instructor and a manager. And I want to talk to Darrell about his aspirations there. And you know, would he like to have managed in the majors, which I'm thinking he would have. Don't want to speak for him, of course. So as we wait on Darrell, good morning, Kevin Porter. How are you this morning? For those of you just joining us, my guest this morning is Darrell Evans. Darrell's in Texas on Central Time, and I'm afraid we may have had a mix-up in the time only because Last night at 10 o'clock, I thought we were good on 8 o'clock Eastern time. So hopefully Darrell's okay. Hopefully nothing's going on there that we need to be concerned about. I will probably try to call Darrell here in a second. I'm going to give him a couple more minutes. That's a good point. Let's talk about the real quick while we're waiting on Darrell. Let's talk about the Field of Dreams game last night. We're going to talk about it more Sunday with Mark Mancini from Mancini Sports. By the way, guys, before I get into that, my guest Sunday will be, I'll have Mark Mancini from Mancini Sports on. Also, he's got shows on XM and Sirius Radio. We'll talk about the American League division races. We're going to talk about Field of Dreams game. And we'll also talk to, in the morning, Byron Williams and Jim Jeffcoat. Byron was a former wide receiver with the Giants and the Eagles, and Jim Jeffcoat's former Cowboy. And they're starting their own show on the Northeast Streaming Sports Network with that. Well, I believe will air exclusively on our YouTube network. It'll be the J and B Talking Shop. So two really fun guys. I've been on the Mac and Jack show many times. I've been on the show many times with Byron on the Mac and Jack show, and he's a really good guy. He knows his stuff with football. He's, being an insider, having played. I'm sure he'll do a great job, and so will Jim Jeffcoat. Really good former Cowboy. I spent some time with Jim on our on Northeast Streaming Sports Draft, NFL Draft special. Anyway, back to the Field of Dreams game. What a fun time last night, guys. Fun time. And I think it was just well done. Hey, man, some people didn't maybe like the over dramatization at the beginning. I thought it was just great. Well done with Kevin Costner being part of that opening and the players all coming out of the corn. The ambiance was just awesome. Maybe there was a lot of parks or there was a lot of there's Darrell now. We'll pick this conversation up in a bit. If I could answer the phone. Hi, Darrell.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hey.
How are you? I've got you on the air already. So did you have problems with the link?
Sorry, I got the StreamYard. I'm not.
Yeah, no worries.
Good, so.
No worries.
It's not working. So
I got a picture here to put up of you so everybody can see and know who I'm chatting with. So again, as I said at the opening, guys, whoops, what happened there?
Hold on 1 second, just a minute.
That's okay. You get yourself settled. I'll reintroduce you. Darrell Evans, former Major League Baseball player, 21 seasons in the major leagues with the Braves, the Giants, and the Tigers. Bill James, as I mentioned, we'll talk to Darrell about this. Legendary baseball historian is more than once said Darrell is the most underrated player in the history of Major League Baseball. So that's a pretty good accolade. And it's a wonder sometimes a guy like Darrell Evans doesn't find his way to the Hall of Fame. So we'll talk to Darrell about that and much, much more once he's settled there. How you doing, Darrell?
Okay, I'm good, Keith. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Had little technical problems here, but if we can do it on the cell or on the phone, it'd be great.
Yeah, we're good. I believe everybody can hear me. I'll wait for somebody to comment. Usually they'll comment if they can't hear somebody when they've called in. So I've got you on my Bluetooth through the soundboard. So welcome to the show, Darrell. I'm glad to have you on.
Well, thank you.
Technology is a wonderful thing, right? Till it doesn't work. So no problem.
Sometimes it's us. So whatever.
Well, you know what? Again, I'm not a youngster, and I struggle myself sometimes. I'm good as long as everything goes smoothly. Right? If things don't go smoothly, I get flustered. So anyway, we'll work through it. We got to do this on the phone.
Okay.
So
sounds good.
Great.
Okay.
So Darrell, listen, I've already, chatted a little bit about, your career and how you were drafted. You were drafted several times by a bunch of teams before you actually signed. I know you were drafted by the Cubs and the Yankees and the Tigers, and you finally signed with the A's. But after a few years in the A's organization, you ended up in the Rule 5 draft, and I'm guessing a blessing for you in the fact that you ended up in the Braves organization after that. Do you look at it that way yourself?
Well, no question, and I got to give credit. I happened to be in the first draft in 1965 when I graduated from high school. So unfortunate in a way, because before then, obviously, you could sign with any team. And as you can see, I had interest from a lot of teams, but things work out the way they're supposed to. I didn't sign with the other teams for a few reasons, but getting with the A's and then only playing about 2 months, and then going into the Marines and being reserves for 6 months, coming out and playing. Done well enough. They sent me to Double-A Birmingham, and I roomed with Raleigh Fingers and played with so many of those guys who won the
Blue, right? Wasn't Vita Blue on your?
Yeah, with all those guys that won the 3 championships in a row and all that kind of stuff. But I was one step behind Sal Bando at third base, and he had a breakout year, and he played over 20 years too. So obviously it was probably a great idea for me to get to go to another team. And Eddie Robinson, who is the oldest living ball player right now, he lives close to me here in Fort Worth and has had so much to do with that. He was the A's farm director and then became the assistant general manager for the Braves,
right.
And liked me enough to. And I was left on the AAA roster, so he liked me enough to take me with the Braves. And like you said, it was obviously, looking back, it was the biggest break I ever got. Although, going to the Braves, I'd only been in the minor leagues. I played 2 months in the Double-A, and then I'd only been in the minor leagues for 4 months. And now I'm going to Major League spring training with the Atlanta Braves, and it was a fantastic thing for me. And so. Although they had Clete Boyer at the time, third base, and they were in '69, they won the National League West. With the Rule 5, they had to pretty much keep me around and not send me back. So just had to wait my turn for Clete. They ended up trading him, and in a couple of years, and I got my shot. So you look back and go, you have no idea that it's a good thing at the time, but it certainly was the best thing that ever happened to me, probably.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, you came up. You bounced around the majors or the minors a little bit, and you played different positions. As you said, you were a third baseman. But you played some first base. You played some outfield. When you come up for good with the Braves, they're not quite the team they were in '69, right? But still, I mean, you had some great players, legendary Henry Aaron. Obviously, you ended up playing for Eddie Matthews, one of the great third basemen of all time. Come up with Dusty Baker, who ended up being a great player as well. What was it like as a youngster to come up and be around like a Henry Aaron and an Eddie Matthews?
Well, just happened to be that Eddie Matthews was my favorite player and idol. And growing up, I always wanted to emulate him. I'm from Southern California, from Pasadena, and of course, he's all-time Hall of Fame third baseman, left-handed hitter from California. So it was easy to love him. Plus, my favorite teams growing up back at that time was the 57, 58 Braves, who were in the World Series 2 years. And even though I grew up in Southern California, the Dodgers.
That's interesting.
Well, the Dodgers weren't out there yet. There wasn't. They were still in New York and Brooklyn. So. It was easy to find that great Braves team, and all the Hall of Famers, Warren Spahn and all, and winners. So now, as I get to the Braves after getting in the minor leagues, Eddie Matthews was the hitting coach, my idol. Going in a place and just so thrilled to be able to meet somebody like him, and then. You look around, like you said, Hank Aaron and another Hall of Famer, Orlando Cepeda, was on that team, and Phil Niekro was on that team, and actually in 1969, Hoyt Wilhelm's last year, I think it was his last year, the Hall of Fame pitcher. So there was a reason why we won in '69, but it's hard to repeat. And we were in the National League West, and where the start of the Big Red Machine and the Dodgers reign and all that kind of stuff. So, Dusty and I came in together, and they kind of labeled us as the new Eddie Matthews and Hank Aaron, and
That's tough to live up to.
Yeah, but to go in there and get to play with the best players, but Hank Aaron, to me, the best player in baseball in history, maybe. And
yeah,
although I kidded him, I got to put, I was a teammate for 5.5 years, and after seeing him later on and going other places, I used to kid him and go, maybe you're the second best player because, Babe Ruth won 100 games pitching too. So there was but every day that was like going to a college education, the greatest university ever, to just sit and watch them, how they went about doing their job every day and learning and pressing you and pushing you to get better and to learn. And the opportunity was there. And I was certainly ready to take advantage of that. So there was a pressure on me. Obviously, we had the greatest players in the world getting to play and face the greatest pitchers was an education that I couldn't have had a better one with this particular Hank and Eddie there for me.
What was it like, Darrell? You were a close-up witness to history, obviously, as Henry Aaron chased Babe Ruth's home run record since broken, but we'll not even talk about that part of it. But what was it like to be that close to that history-making event through the 72, 73 season leading up to it, and then it finally happening in 74?
Well, to be intimately involved was the key. Is that basically going to work, going to the ballpark, doing what you always dreamt of doing, loving it and everything, and then going there and getting to watch. To me, Hank was his personality and the way that he went about things. There was nobody else that I know of in or out of baseball that could have handled all of the pressure and everything that went with it. I thought it was pressure. We felt it all around us and all that kind of stuff. Although it wasn't directed at us, it was just kind of get out of the way and let him perform. And he was so good at just being. Like I said, he was the greatest teacher because he was so good at showing everybody how to deal with things. And a wonderful, wonderful thing that some people didn't want him to do. And it was all because, the love we have of Babe Ruth and the icon of the game, not just in baseball, but in the world and in society and everything. And, so the spotlight was on there, and all of a sudden he got to 700 and the press and everybody else was like, well, who is this guy? They kind of, it was going to be Willie Mays or Mickey Mantle or whatever, if anybody ever came close. And then all of a sudden, this guy comes out of, who was a big star, was very well known, all-star game every year and all that kind of stuff. But he played in Milwaukee, and then he played in Atlanta. And he was kind of discovered by the world. And, we used to laugh about it all the time. We're welcome and get to see the best player, maybe the best player of all time. So he was on a mission to win games. That's what he was there for. And he knew how great he was. He'd already been great for a long, long time. And he expected us, you worry about your teammates and how they do to win the game. We won in 69 and I was a rookie. I didn't get to play. But I was part of the team and
it's still a great experience, right?
Well, yeah. And then, so when I kind of got a chance to do something, and then Eddie and Hank told me and go, hey, you're here to hit home runs and you can hit home runs and you can be a power guy. And that's what we expect out of you. I just kind of went along for the ride. So at the time too, we had Davey Johnson and Dusty had 29 home runs that year in 73 too. And we had, of course, Davey had a breakout year who was a big star, and, he hit 20 home runs or close to it with the Orioles. But when he got over to the Braves, it was like, hey, come on, you could do better than that. So, and they told me the same thing. And so we went off and we got to be part of that because we had such a breakout years that the big thing, one of the things was we were trying to win ball games, obviously, and all that kind of stuff and outscore everybody. So but when in 73 at the end, his 40th home run was 713. Right. So, and it was the first time we've the press told us, everybody else, like, the first time any three teammates had ever hit 40 on one team. Well, it's amazing that, what a record and all that kind of stuff. Well, Davey and I got there before Hank. Right. Excited about what we were doing, but Hank took us in, and when he hit his 40th, after us kidding him and telling him, "Hey, the only way we're going to get in the Hall of Fame is if you hit your 40th," and I try to take pressure off him and try to make it fun for him, which he always felt that way too. So, teammates trying to help him out, and the reward we got is he took us into his press conference afterwards and told the world how important it was and how excited he was about being a part of a record that had never happened before, and included us. So, you just get to become close to somebody because you're spending more time with your teammates than you are your family or anybody else, and just the mastery you got, and you don't have to pay for the ticket. And it's just like, this guy was so. I remember the first time I ever met him, I wanted to watch how he got dressed, because when I played, no one wanted to stick out. It was like, okay, how are you going to fit in? And I wanted to figure out I wanted to be like him and be like, so not to stand out. And he was such a warm and welcoming and just such a driven person. We all know what he'd come through, but we'd all come through stuff. And everybody that gets into professional baseball has to go through the minor leagues and learn and all that kind of stuff. And then you become a veteran and you get to teach the other players. And that's what he did the best. And wow, we got to watch this master go about, and just it's the ultimate respect. I guess that's the way I should describe it, is that, Sandy Koufax called him Bad Henry. I talked to Bob Gibson, and, it was Mr. Aaron, and just the way that we were in awe as teammates. The team's other side too was the same thing. And, so just be blessed to be around somebody like that. So he just drew everybody up higher. He had such a high ceiling. We loved him so much and we respect him so much, is that, come on, you could do this too.
Yeah, and had to lift the team up. What let me ask you this, because those Braves teams in the early 70s, mid 70s, as you came up, Dusty came up, Ralph Garr was there. Phil Niekro, you mentioned, anchored the pitching staff, and I know Ron Reed was there. Were some good pitchers, but I mean, the team didn't get over the top necessarily when it comes to wins and losses. Had some great individual performances, as you mentioned, in 73. What do you think held that team back? Did the pressure of that home run chase affect the team, or were there other factors that might have held the team back a bit?
No, I think one thing that I look back on is that I unfortunately had to play 15 years in the National League West. Mm-hmm. And at that time, remember, like I said, look who was starting to come into play. And so it's so hard to win back to back or more than once, as we all see in the history of baseball. And there's no kind of dynasties and stuff. And at the time, you're like, we felt like we probably didn't. Well, it wasn't that we didn't have as good a pitch as anybody else. They had to face the Big Red Machine and the Dodgers and all these other great players. I mean, if you look at that era, there was so many great players. There have been so many guys in the Hall of Fame, so many that should be, and the hitters and pitchers. So the competition back then too, we played our own division most of the time, much more than they do now. So when you've got two or three of the best teams in baseball in your division, you're beating up on each other. And I think too, it was, we were, because we won in 69, everybody expected us to always be there. Injuries, all kinds of things. Guys have great years and then not so great years. And it's all, it comes down to playing that game that night. So we always felt like, well, shoot, let's get Hank to the plate and give him a chance and we'll win the game. But We had a lot of games during those times when we had 3 or 4 run leads and lost or gave them up. So, and it wasn't because we had bad pitching or anything else. It was just that other teams had great hitting too. So it was an exciting time actually because it was kind of outlasting the other team somewhat. And then, you lose a tough ball game and start getting behind and to catch up to those teams because you had to win 100 games and pretty much. So it was great though for the competition. It was great that you knew when you went in, if you won the National League West, you were going to be maybe the best team in baseball.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier on, which actually I didn't know, that the Braves, the Milwaukee Braves, at least were your favorite team growing up. What was it like? You had a really good career through those early 70s, but you end up getting traded, shockingly to me, for Willie Montanez, who had some decent years, but I don't think he matched up with Darrell Evans myself. What was it like for you being traded from that team that you grew up with, being your favorite team, and had your formative major league seasons under? It was 2
ways. Obviously, nobody likes to be traded. I think every ball player would say, whatever organization, you would like to stay there the whole time, your whole career. But it was a trade that I kind of forced on him. Because I had such a terrible start in 1976 on a team that was first year free agent. We had Andy Messersmith. We had made a big trade with the Dodgers. Dusty had gone to the Dodgers. We had gotten Jimmy Wynn and Vittoria, all kinds of. But Jimmy Wynn and I, we were expected to do a much more, and we just had a terrible start. The worst start of my life, just things weren't happening very good at all. And it was frustrating and everything else. And actually it was a blessing because, Ted Turner thought I couldn't see anymore and did my eyes. And, I wore contacts and glasses. And anyway, that was kind of an excuse, but in reality, it was fantastic for me because I got to go out, stayed in the National League West, but I went to the Giants closer to home in Southern California and be a part of that rivalry that was being renewed at the time between the Dodgers Giant rivalry, which was indescribable for people that haven't been there. It was, of course, in New York, Brooklyn, and supposedly, but when they came out to California, it wasn't the same intensity until those mid-90 teams or mid-70 teams where the Giants were really good, were great teams, really good teams, and the Dodgers were really good teams. And, 55,000 every night at both stadiums. Everybody hated each other. The fans hated each other. The cities hated each other. And the atmosphere was just incredible. So it was a fantastic time to be there. And of course the disappointment and all that kind of stuff, that you want to do good and you want to do it with the original team and all that kind of stuff. And I got to and the one great thing is I got to go back my final year, and be a Brave again in my last year. But those runs with the Giants, again, I had to contend with the Big Red Machine and the Dodgers, and
that didn't go away, right?
I mean, the whole of it. Yeah. So that, and I didn't know any better and I didn't know any differently. And, but just the intensity was so great, and it was a great place to live. It was a great sports town, and then it was becoming another great sports town, again, and a new generation of people. And, those hardy people that had to go to Candlestick and sit out there every night. If you've never been there, you just have no idea how to describe how bad that can be. But they started coming out, and they started coming supporting us, and the team, the city caught fire again. So, and I had bragging rights on my family that were supposedly, they were supposedly my fans, but they were Dodger fans all along. So that was, and the great players I got to play with, and there, and we traded for Divida Blue, and all of a sudden we became legitimate contenders too, and so great lineups too with Jack Clark and Chili Davis and Jeff Leonard, and before that was Maddox and Matthews and all that. I mean, the Giants were loaded, in the same way. We just happened to be in the toughest division of baseball at the time.
You got to play with another future Hall of Famer for a short time, at least anyway, and Willie McCovey as well.
Oh, one of my best buddies, and another guy that, the same kind of person that Hank, and the same respect that Hank had from the baseball world. And just this guy that just lifted everybody up, and of course his physical presence, but his demeanor and everything else. And you're right. To get put in a place, and how many people can say, I hit third in both those lineups most of the time. Who could say he hit third in front of Hank Aaron and third in front of Willie McCovey, and did pretty good. So
that's for sure.
So. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought him up. We lost Willie and Hank in the last year, and just a big part of your life, and a big part of your presence and everything, and how much they had to do with it, with my success, or my being in such great an atmosphere and everything, and so just another blessing that went along, and shoot, I couldn't wait to go to the ballpark every day and watch them. That was, it was like being a super fan, going there and sitting there. You got to perform, but at the same time, you're like, oh man, I wish I could just sit here and watch him all the time, which I got a chance to do of both of those guys.
Did you overlap? My favorite ball player growing up was Bobby Mercer. Did you get to play with Bobby when you were in San Francisco?
I actually played. We traded Bobby Mercer, or traded for him when I got there. I think it was 70 for Bobby Bonds.
Yeah, he was there in 75 originally, right? Yeah.
Yeah, in 76. And, Bobby Bonds to me was probably the most talented player I'd ever seen, even more than Hank and Willie, because he was the fastest guy in California in high school. And he was just a tremendous player. He stole bases standing up. He was almost the first guy to do 40-40 back at the time when that was impossible. And then we got Bobby, and I got to play with Bobby, and poor Bobby was supposed to be the next Mickey Mantle and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. What a great player he was. And he didn't like Candlestick Park. He loved having that short porch Yankee Stadium, and then having a candlestick was an adjustment.
I seem to remember Bobby quoting Mark Twain about the coldest winter he ever spent was a summer he spent in San Francisco.
Well, right. And you can't, unless you've been there, and like I said, you can't describe. Every day was an adventure, and unfortunately, it wasn't so much. The cold and all that kind of stuff, and it was really cold. I remember growing up and watching the games from Southern California with the Giant-Dodger games, and seeing everybody with parkas in June and July. And the reality of that was, that can't be right, but it was. And so the weather had something to do with the game sometimes, which is unfortunate, and the wind in particular. So it was a sense of pride to play there, and I for almost 8 years, and it took some getting used to, and it was mind over matter, and you look back and go, well, I wouldn't want it any other way, or the way it worked and all that kind of stuff. But it was a challenge. Actually, it was a challenge to get out on the field sometimes, because the wind was blowing so hard that you had to, get back and push the door with your shoulder. And as soon as you did that, your hat flew off the center field and fence. So it was, that was the start of everything.
What was it like playing? What was it like playing for a Hall of Fame player in Frank Robinson? A lot of times.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay. A lot of time, I know a lot of times Hall of Fame players struggle, when they go into a managerial position because it's hard for players to live up to their expectations. What was it like with Frank?
Well, it was great. I played for Eddie, Hall of Famer with Eddie, and of course, and because they were, I think the perception it's hard to play for them. It all comes down to people's personalities and whatever role you're in. And as a manager, I think it was great. It was hard to play for them at times because you felt like you were letting them down because both of them were very vocal and both of them were very much what they expected out of you was more than probably you even expected out of yourself. And I think a lot of guys kind of took it that way. So, but I thought, and looking back, that it was great. I mean, are you kidding me? The concept that maybe they struggle. Well, these guys have played for 20 years at the highest level. Yeah. So, the communication to other people, which I think was sometimes suspect from certain people because, this guy was pushing you and pushing you and pushing you. And they didn't pull any punches, either one of them. So, it was like, wow, okay. You don't have to love me all the time. I get it. I get yelled at. And, sometimes I had to. Eddie was always on my side, so that I didn't. And of course, I was young. I would never question him. But with Frank, after playing all that time, my 15th year, he was a manager there, and I was like, sometimes I had to remind him that, you made some outs once in a while too. You were in a slump once in a while. You didn't always do everything perfectly. So, it all comes down to personality. And when you got a leader, those type of guys as the leader of your team, basically, even though they're not playing, they're that presence there. They're going, hey, man, you're going to hear about it if you make a mistake. So it's not that you need to please them. And I think that's what some people fail to see. The point is, it's not about pleasing them as a person. It's about pleasing them because they'd been there and done that.
Perfect explanation. Listen, 84, you play, or after 83, you play at your option. You go to Detroit. You play for another Hall of Famer, not a player this time, but a Hall of Fame.
Yeah, lucky me. See, I made all these guys Hall of Famers, so I told them already.
They seem to be a lot of them there, so I'll have to congratulate you. But you go to Detroit, Darrell, for baseball, a fairly advanced age, and you have some of the best years of your career there in Detroit.
Well, I never thought, I always thought it was funny growing up and everything, and watching great players play, and then it was like, okay, well, once you reach a certain age, you can't play anymore, and you're going downhill and all that stuff, and it was like, but I was living that, and I was like I said, I watched all these players play for especially Hank and Willie, play for all this time, but they didn't go downhill. It was the perception of somebody else when they looked and go, wow, he didn't get a hit today, and he's in a slump. Well, he was in a slump when he was 20. Yeah, right. And but it's scary when those guys are in a slump, and the pitchers know that too, because they know they're going to come out of it. They know they're not going to fall apart and go away. So it was, of course, living that, watching these guys do that. It never occurred to me that, other people may he's going downhill and he's going, particularly like my last year and with the Tigers at 88, I hit 22 home runs and drove in 70 runs. That would have been, and I was 41 years old, 42 years old. Well, when I did that at 21, man, I was an up and coming star. When I was 41, I was a guy ready to fall off the cliff and get replaced. So, I had some experience of that, and what happened was when I went to the Tigers, the choice was the Tigers or the Yankees or the Dodgers. Those are the three teams that had a lot of interest in me as a free agent. Unfortunately,
as a Yankee fan, you made the wrong choice, but you probably made the right choice.
Well, just think if I would have gone to the Yankees and maybe we would have won a World Series there. They had great teams. And in 85, I tell this about, in 85, I won the home run title, the oldest one ever.
Yep.
And if I would have done that, a lot of people maybe don't know about that. If I'd have done that as a Yankee, I would have been the first home run as a Yankee since Roger Maris.
You might have hit 60 home runs in Yankee Stadium.
Well, I'm just saying I would have been the first home run champ in the American League as a Yankee since him. And the legacy and all that that comes along with that, it's funny because when I was deciding on where to go, Howard Cosell actually called me and one of his first words out of his mouth was, what the hell are you thinking? You're not going to wear a Yankee uniform, wear pinstripes for the end of your career. So things would have been maybe different, but I look back and go, I picked the right team. And what was so awesome is that same perception of the best teams in baseball were playing in the American League East at that time in the 80s.
You kept going to really good divisions.
So I'm going in and playing in reality. The best record baseball was the Yankees in 81 and the Brewers in 82 and the Baltimore in 83 and the Detroit in 84 and Toronto in 85 and Boston in 86 and Detroit again in 87. So you had to, again, I relished it. I look back and go, well, you know what? If you win that division, you're truly the best team in baseball. And you may not win the World Series, but you were the best on the best team in baseball. So I looked at that as Detroit, looking at them and going, man, they were, when I got there in 84, actually, and after making the decision and went to spring training and really didn't know guys, I was 15 years in the National League. The Tigers, I had I never really played against them in spring trainings. So they were in Florida, and I was with them in San Francisco and Arizona. But of course, I saw them on TV, and I knew them, and I'd seen them in the All-Star game the year before, and knew how great they were. I didn't really know how great they were. They were in the middle of their. You look at that lineup; it was the All-Star lineup. The best catcher in baseball, Lance Price, Trammell Whitaker up the middle, Chet Lemon, as great a center fielder as it was in baseball, one as good a one as I ever played with. At the time we had Howard Johnson was just starting as a third baseman, and we had Larry Herndon and Levy at 30 home runs, and Kirk Gibson was breaking out into being the star that he was. What a lineup, and they were hungry. They were kind of veteran players that were ready to win, and they loved having me in there and being part of that because I hit 30 home runs the year before in 83. When I got over, they all thought I hit 40 or 50 every year, so that was good. I wasn't going to tell me different, but it was just. And then I went to me the greatest sports town in the country, in Detroit. It's hockey town, it's Motown, and it's the sports history and everything else, and playing in that great stadium. And the great thing about going to one of the greatest things about the American League is I got to play in Yankee Stadium and Fenway and Cleveland and Baltimore and all those places that I cherish. And the only ones kind of left in the National League was Wrigley Field, but nothing like the oldest, 100-year-old ballparks and fans that were so traditional and so cared so much, and they were hungry there in Detroit. And man, oh man, there's nothing like winning the World Series. I don't know how to describe it, doing that and all that kind of stuff, but the parade. When you realize how many people were happy and excited and all the years and stuff, and you were on the team that provided that. When you're in there and there's a million people on that parade and the whole state of Michigan and representing the Midwest and tradition and everything, it was just a boost to not so much my career, but to going, hey, you got to keep hanging in here. I mean, you got a chance to go ahead and do something you hadn't done anyplace else or gotten a chance to do anyplace else, and they don't expect you to be the number one star or anything like that. Just fit in and just watch all these great players play. So, if you could pick things, maybe I would have picked the Yankees, or looking back, maybe, but at the time it was a hard decision. And obviously it was the right one for me. Yeah. I get to wear that ring every day, and it's only a few people get to do that.
There's only a handful. It had to mean a lot to you after toiling all those years to finally get. You hadn't been in the postseason, except for 16, but you weren't playing. Yeah. It had to be really awesome for you after all those years to get to the World Series and actually win.
Yeah, because as a veteran player, after you play for a while, being a veteran, you play 5 or 6 years, and you become a veteran, kind of, because not very many people get to play 5 or 6 years. Then all of a sudden, you're like going, oh, man, it wasn't a different goal. It was when you see how things work and go, oh, man, that one game slipped away and we didn't do this and we lost a pennant. I mean, if you think about it, you lose pennants by 1 or 2 games. Yeah. In 6 months, you can look back at every season and go, man, we should have won. Well, we won 3 in a row. We should have won 4 in a row, but we lost that game for whatever reason. And then we lost the next one. So we actually only played 500 instead of having a 5 or 6 game winning streak. And then all of a sudden everything picks up. And in that year in Detroit, of course, we got up to the greatest start of all time, 35-5. Amazing. I mean, it was impossible to beat us unless we beat ourselves. And obviously we didn't do that. We played so good, but even though we made mistakes and things happened to us, we overcame that because look at the lineup we had. And the pitching, of course, with Morris and Petrie, and we had Willie Hernandez, that had a career year in the bullpen, and Aurelio Lopez, and we had Doug Bear, who was a great, I had to name all those guys. We knew every time we went out there, we had a great chance to win a ball game, and being hungry like they were, there was no stopping us. It just builds on itself. So I kind of got to enjoy that whole year that way after that start, because normally you're going down to September and hoping you're in a pennant race, and then the intensity builds up and you're going through this, and man, every game means more, and he loses. Oh my God. Well, this one was just kind of the opposite, where you're like, it's like, well, I wish the season was over with. We were 35-5. I wish the season was over with now, because now it's not like you're trying to hang on, but you're trying to prove to everybody that you were that good. And we played really good. Of course, we played not as good as that, but the results weren't as great. But I remember one of the greatest things we won when we went 35-5. We also won 17 games in a row on the road. And so we swept Oakland, and we went down to Anaheim, my hometown. We had 55. Every place we went, the country was all excited, and the press and the other team scared of us and all this kind of stuff. I guess, I don't know. I don't think they were scared. They were trying to beat the winners, but they just couldn't do it. So we went down to Anaheim, and we had a bunch of guys from Southern California, and we swept them, and we won on a Sunday afternoon, 17 games in a row, 35-5, and we got a standing ovation from the 50,000 visiting in the visiting ballpark. I mean, that was how involved everybody was with that. It was like, we were beating their team, but it was almost like everybody was like, oh my God, this is something that's never happened before. We want to go see it and be a part of it. So I got to do that. After 40 games in, I had another 120 where you could kind of enjoy it and grasp it and the reality. And then the reality is it doesn't mean anything unless we win the playoffs and we win the World Series. And when that happened, it made it even sweeter.
Listen, you played, as we just talked about a little bit, you played for some really big personalities. managerial wise? I think I know the answer based on reading about you. Who is your favorite guy to play for?
Well, I think I look back at Eddie because, he was my he was my idol growing up, and then became the hitting coach when I was there, and then became the manager. So, and he became a very, very close friend of my family and my dad and everybody else because he was very outgoing, personal, and he really loved me as a third baseman. He could take me, and he used to tell me, you know what? I know all the things you're going through right now. He goes, when I was 21 years old, I didn't know where the ball was going all the time. I tried to knock the ball down, and I tried to throw a guy out too fast and all this kind of stuff. So he could relate to me. And at the same time, on the road trips, my parents used to go, my family and all that stuff. And whenever we were around, introducing them to Eddie, of course, that was a big thrill for them. And he would always invite my dad and go, "Hey, come on, Dick, I want to talk to you about," because he knew my dad was a great athlete. My mom had played professional softball. So he brought them into his life too, and my dad and him became really good friends, and so much of that happened, and so I guess I should have thought that that's the way it was all the time, but obviously it wasn't. All the people that I played for, of course, you respect them because it's not your decision to make, and it's not your job. Your job, they're there. The manager and the coaches are there to help you. The manager is there to orchestrate this stuff. A lot of times I don't agree with what happened or how it happened or whatever, but all I cared about was, hey, playing time. I'm better getting to play every day. And Eddie and Frank Robinson knew that too, because that's the way they knew how to do it. Some of the other managers hadn't done that and hadn't played. So, maybe I had to educate them sometime. I'll put that, but once in a while. And like you said, when they're not that much older than you, most of them.
Right.
I used to, Sparky always looked like I was kid him and go, "Oh yeah, you look like you were," anyway.
He looked
you were
65
born this
when
old.
he was 30 for crazy.
Well, of course he did. And, but he'd had great success, the Big Red Machine and Cincinnati. And so, and then when I got to Detroit and the players loved him, and, he was literally a grandfather to some of those guys because he looked so old and they weren't that much. Anyway, so you learn how to not just fit in, but you learn how to be a help to them because they have to communicate to the players. And sometimes the players don't want to hear so much from the manager. They'd much rather hear from the other coaches or the coaches or your teammates. Yeah. So you become a conduit in a lot of ways. And then again, you have to get your respect and you have to give it. So I loved all the guys I played for. They were managers when I played. They're fantastic. Some of them were learning. And you look back and you go, well, at the time, okay, he's a young guy, the inexperienced guy. Okay, maybe that. Okay, so you don't realize that because you want instant success, you want everything to go right, and you want to have that personality be an inspiration for the team. And some guys do it differently, and it's always who gets when the team doesn't play well. Well, who goes? Usually it's the manager,
we can't find 25 guys, right?
Well, yeah, but that's an unfortunate thing in ways, but in the inside, sometimes it just wasn't a good fit. And at the guy's time or whatever, his experience or whatever. And so, going to Detroit and having Sparky there, I didn't really know Sparky. I played against him and I knew him that much and I knew his reputation to be a real fiery guy. And I'm like, I played for guys like, okay, that's okay. And then, but he had learned that, hey, get the most out of yourself, and there's no excuses for not having that attitude. And he was blessed. Oh my God! He had the Big Red Machine,
Yeah.
and then he had the Tiger teams. So, it was.
Talent makes a
Kiddingly,
great
it wasn't.
manager, right?
Yeah, that makes you a real great manager. But you got to give him credit, man. He's won in both leagues, and people loved him, and the players loved him and respect him and everything else. And I used to kid him all the time because, he only played 1 year in the major leagues, and sometimes I had to remind him of that. And let the players play. And we had fun with him. And Sparky was good and didn't go off very much. But he was great with the press, so he protected us a lot from that. And especially on that team back then, he was the spokesperson to the press and that was good. So because none of us had gone through the kind of success we were having. So, there's a lot more than just making up the lineup and making pitching changes. And if you're lucky to be blessed with that, then you're going to have success. And the big thing is the players' respect. Nothing else matters, and you're part of the family. So, man, I look back on all those guys I played for; they were all great at that.
Great points. We only got a couple minutes left here, but I got to ask you quickly. I mentioned in the opening before you got here and after you came on that Bill James has often said that you're the most underrated player in the history of baseball. As you look back at your career, do you feel that way, that you had a really good career and it's Hall of Fame consideration worthy? You're a home run hitter. Let me just add one thing. You're a home run hitter, but unlike today where home run hitters are striking out 180 or 200 times a year, you weren't striking out that much. You only had a couple of years where you struck out 100 times. Games changed a lot. How do you look at your career today?
Well, I look at myself, the things that I'm most proud of is that I was the best base runner that I could be. And that, when you first started, you don't have any idea what success is about. You have no idea. I mean, of course, you dream about things happening and then they just, you have to learn how to do it. And, so, what people say about me, not just Bill James and all that kind of stuff, it's amazing. Dave Bergman was a good friend, passed away and all that kind of stuff. And, one of the last things he goes, you were the greatest base runner I ever saw. And, Bill James, when he put that out, was that people, he got on base a lot and he walked. I led the league in walks and hitting in front of Hank and Willie. And so, those kinds of respect things will fire you up. So it's not like you don't have to worry about your stats. It's about your stature. And so when you have the stature and you have respect from everybody else, it's like the challenge is that, Hank used to always go, you know what? They respect you when they look over at you when you're standing and sitting in the on-deck circle. Yeah. And they're worried about you coming up and not so much worried about the guy at home plate. Yeah. So, it was like, but you know what the thing, maybe the most proud I was is part of it was that I had to be great at third base. That's the hardest position on the field as far as I'm concerned in a lot of ways. So I had to be proficient at that because otherwise then you're DH and then you become old. So I took pride in being the best third baseman I could. And one of the things that I love reading about, and, you see stuff is that I have all time, I'm the first at assists per game at third base. So, it was like Vida Blue gave me the nickname of Hoover, and which is a positive nickname at third and all that kind of stuff. So baseball is such a beautiful game that you can never be the best. You can never be perfect, but you can always learn. And I don't know any other place or atmosphere or job or anything that when you go to, you can learn something new with millions and millions of people. So, it was, for me, it wasn't easy to get really good at everything, but I had to. I wasn't the fastest guy, so I had to learn. And this was growing up and all this stuff because of my family and everybody else, but it was like expected that I learned how to slide. because I wasn't the fastest guy. I learned how to be as good a base runner as, because I wasn't quite the fastest guy. I wasn't the Brooks Robinson yet at third and all that kind of stuff. So I need to learn how to do that. So, and they gave me a uniform for 21 years. Well, a couple more years in the minor league. So they must have liked kind of what I was doing. So I look back and I kind of laugh when people go, "Oh, you're underrated." It's like, well, I didn't feel underrated. I don't think the pitchers or the other teams, they've told me afterwards I wasn't underrated in their minds, but at the time, yeah, you're kind of insecure and you're feeling good about that. And then you take those positive things. And you have every day to look forward to doing it again and doing it year by year, when some people are going, "Man, I couldn't do that." Well, that's the point.
Yeah.
No, you couldn't do that. And yet they kept giving me a uniform. And I really got pissed at the end because they took it away from me with the Braves in 90, and because the owners they made it 24-man teams. Right, and I was the guy and then they changed it 3 days later, but whatever. So, of course, I could still play then and be a role model and be a mentor for so many people. And I still turn on fastballs most times. So, I mean, I look at it and I go, wow, not many people have a greater run. And, I played all that time and was never on the disabled list. So that's some luck got involved in that. But that was the one thing my dad always never missed a day of work and pounded that, hey, if you can go, go. So I had all those things, those positive things, and I got a chance to apply them and fall where it may. I didn't play to be in the Hall of Fame, but I get enough of those positive vibes that, I feel good about what I did. And so I want to show people that, and I try to do that as much as I can. So it was a wonderful, wonderful ride. I tell people, the greatest thing I get to do is every day I get to wake up and put my World Series ring on and never have a bad day. Who else can say that?
You had a career to be proud of. I wish I had more time because there's more I'd like to talk to you. I'd like to have you on again, Darrell, because there's more stuff I want to get to about the games today and yesterday, and that's a whole show in itself. I got to tell you never played for a team that was one of my favorite teams, but growing up, you were one of my favorite players. So I was so happy to have you on today, Darrell. I appreciate you coming on, and we're going to have you on again if you're amenable to it.
Sounds good, Keith.
Darrell,
yeah, sounds good. I appreciate you having me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You have a great weekend.
Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.
Guys, the great Darrell Evans, as I have said, one of my favorite players, did all the things right. He talked about some of the things that he did well. Why guys like Bill James think he was one of the most underrated players or the most underrated player in history is he did some of the little things that don't happen in today's game. And I want to get Darrell back on, and I want to talk about those things. So I hope that we can do that going forward and talk about, again, that was when the game was in its glory days to me, the days that Darrell Evans was playing. Guys, I'm way over. I got to get to Maggot Jack. Keith Engel, join me Sunday for our live stream of consciousness. We're going to have Byron Williams and Jim Jeffcoat talking about their new show on Northeast Streaming Sports. And we'll have Mark Mancini from Mancini Sports. Guys, Keith Engel, TGI Sports Talk right here on Northeast Streaming Sports. Enjoy your weekend.